Good morning, children. Today we are going to discuss about the human respiratory system. In the previous classes, we discussed about respiratory functions to exchange oxygen and carbon dioxide between atmosphere and blood, to maintain pH, to protect us from pathogens and pollutants, to maintain the vocal cords vocalization, to remove the heat. Compulsory respiration is required, like that we discussed, and the respiration which occurs to the trachea, tracheal respiration system, the respiration which occurs to the gills, bronchial respiration system, the respiration which occurs to the lungs, pulmonary respiration system, the respiration which occurs to the skin is called cutaneous respiration system. Like that we discussed about different types of respiratory organs in the different animals, right? Today we will completely focus on which one? The human respiratory system. We will be completely focused on which one? Human respiratory system. Okay, observe very carefully. The human respiratory system includes, first one, what? The human respiratory system includes external nostrils, nasal cavity, pharynx, larynx. External, what you called? Nostrils, nasal cavity, pharynx, larynx, okay, trachea, bronchi, bronchioles, lungs. External nostrils, nasal cavity, pharynx, larynx, trachea, bronchi, bronchioles, and lungs. You know very well which one is called voice box and which one is called windpipe. You know that. So here I am writing that one, underlining this. The larynx is called, what do you call the larynx is called? The larynx is called voice box. Larynx is called voice box, and the trachea is called, what do you call the trachea? Trachea is called windpipe. So these points you should have to remember. So what are the human respiratory system includes? External nostrils, nasal cavity, pharynx, larynx. The larynx is called voice box, trachea is called windpipe, bronchi, bronchioles, and lungs. Lungs consist of the units of lungs, sac-like structures, units of the lungs. What do you call units of lungs? Alveoli. Okay, the units of lungs is called alveoli, will be their sac-like structures. So alveoli helpful for the exchange of the gases. Okay, now listen very carefully. The parts starting from the external nostrils, up to the terminal bronchioles. So from here, from where to external nostrils to, okay, to terminal bronchioles. So that particular part, the external nostril to terminal bronchioles, that constitutes the, what do you call that kind of zone? That zone is called, what do you call that zone is called? Conducting zone. What do you call that zone is called? Conducting zone. From where to where? From the what do you called? The terminal bronchioles constitute the, which one? Conducting zone. What do you call this is? Conducting zone. So next, what is the conducting zone? Helpful for the just passage of the air in and out. Next, alveoli. Okay, this is important. Alveoli and the ducts which are there in the helpful for the exchange of the gases in between the blood and alveoli is there. No. So alveoli and ducts, alveoli ducts are called, what is called? Respiratory zone. Togetherly called alveoli and ducts togetherly called, which one? That is called respiratory, what is called? Respiratory zone. This point also very important. So how many zones are there? There are two zones are there. What are those? Conducting zone, respiratory zone. Conducting zone, respiratory zone. This one you should have to remember. Okay. Now, what is the parts of conducting zone? What is the importance of conducting zone? This is another neat bit. The conducting zone humidifies, means cools down the hot air into cool air, and will helpful for the, what you call, cooling of the air. So conducting zone helpful for the humidifies and warms the incoming air. So too much hot in the sense cool down, that cools, and too much cool is there in the sense it will be warms the incoming air. So Conducting zone not only cooling and also warms the incoming air in the cool conditions. This point you should have to remember. Conducting zone, what you called, humidifies and warms the incoming air. In human beings, air enter into the which one? Upper respiratory tract. Upper respiratory tract through external nostrils, right? So in human beings, air enter into the upper respiratory tract through the external nostrils and is okay, external nostrils. This one is very important. The air passes through the nostrils is filtered by fine hair and mucus lining the passage. So the air is there, no, that air is going. So that air is first filtered by which one? Hair. The air is filtered by hairs and mucus lining article lining passage of that tract. Next to the external nostrils too. That leads to which one? Nasal chamber. Nasal chamber which open into the nasopharynx, which opens through the glottis to the larynx region into the trachea. Glottis to trachea, larynx region. Okay, so now the trachea, very important, that is called windpipe. So now the ciliated epithelial cells lining the trachea is a very important point. This one you should remember. The ciliated epithelial cells lining the trachea, then what is that? Will be traps the dust particles, okay, lining the trachea. Next, bronchi and bronchioles secrete mucus, and bronchi mucous membrane lining. The air contains what you call mucous membrane lining. Very important, mucous membrane lining. What is the use of this mucous membrane? It's rich in the glycoprotein. The mucous membrane, the slimy mucus, which in the glycoprotein. It traps the which one? Microorganisms and dust particles attach in the mucous films, and or what will happen? Carried upward to pass down the which one? The gullet during the normal swallowing. So the dust particle will be go down into the normal swallowing. That is the next important point. Next, a thin elastic flap. Very important neat bit. That is called a thin elastic flap like structure. That is called, what do you call it? The thin elastic flap like structure, epiglottis. It is prevents the epiglottis. What it will do? It prevents the what you called fluid to go to larynx. So thin elastic flap called epiglottis prevents the food to go to larynx and avoids the choking of food. Will not allow the food choking in that particular area. Okay, come to the trachea. Okay, up to the food air enter into the trachea. Come about the trachea. The trachea is semi-flexible tube by supported by multiple cartilaginous C-shaped cartilaginous rings are there. C-shaped. This extend up to the mid-thoracic level, mid-thoracic cavity and the level of the fifth thoracic vertebrae. Right and left bronchi will be separated into right and left bronchi. One bronchus each to lung. Okay, one bronchus to each lung bronchi. Then bronchi is again divided into which one? The bronchi is divided into secondary and tertiary. Very important. Secondary bronchi and tertiary bronchi. So like that, secondary and tertiary bronchi and further divide into terminal bronchioles. Bronchi, secondary, tertiary bronchi and bronchioles. Then and also we will see respiratory bronchioles also we will see. This is the most important. What is happen? So left primary bronchi, one bronchus to each lung. Within the lungs, the bronchi divides repeatedly into secondary and tertiary bronchi and further divided into terminal bronchioles and respiratory bronchioles. So this one you have to, So what you have to remember, the bronchi is divided into secondary and tertiary and terminal bronchioles and respiratory bronchioles also. It will be divided in the lungs. Okay children, like this the lungs will be there in the internal part will be bronchioles, like that division will be there in the lungs. Okay children, observe very carefully what we are going to discuss about the human respiratory system. Okay, what is human respiratory system? You know, the respiration system which occurs to the lungs is called pulmonary respiratory system. In humans, the major important what you call respiratory organs, what are the lungs? Major respiratory organs is lungs. Okay, now you see the respiratory system passage. How the respiration process will be takes place. Come on, the respiration system consists of what you call external nostrils. External nostrils to air will go to which one? Nasal cavity to pharynx, pharynx to larynx, larynx to trachea, bronchi, bronchioles and lungs. Here larynx, voice box, here vocal cords are there, that's why we are producing the sound. Here trachea, helpful for the passage of air, so it's called windpipe also. The C-shaped cartilaginous rings are there in the trachea. So very important point, remember, that is alveoli. In our lungs, what alveoli is there? What is there? Alveoli is there. It's a units of lungs which are very useful for the exchange of the or diffusion of the gases. Now what will happen? You see, the part starting from the external nostrils to the terminal bronchioles, external nostrils to bronchioles, that is considered the which one? Conducting zone. What is that zone name is? Conducting zone. So, and alveoli and ducts are called. Next point what? Alveoli and ducts are called respiratory zone. Alveoli and ducts are called respiratory. So, conducting zone, respiratory zone. Conducting zone, respiratory zone. Conducting zone, what is the main function of conducting zone? It humidifies and warms the, whenever the hot cool, whenever the cool hot, means warms the air. That is a function of the conducting zone. Humidifies and warms the incoming air. Next, air will go to upper respiratory tract, okay, through external nostrils and is filtered by fine hairs and mucus lining the passage. Next, the external nostrils to, it will go to nasal chamber, nasopharynx, nasopharynx to glottis of the larynx region to trachea. Trachea, there will be what you called the ciliated epithelial cells are there in the lining of trachea. Then trachea, after there will be bronchi and bronchioles are there. They secretes the mucus. What is the mucous membrane lining the airway? Contains the goblet cells. Very important. Which cells? Goblet cells, which secretes the mucus. Mucous membrane lining the airway. Okay. That mucous membrane, how, from where it is, mucus is coming? Because of the goblet cells which are present in the mucous membrane lining the airway contains the goblet cells which secretes the mucus. This mucus is slimy material. Okay, the slimy material rich in which one? Glycoprotein. This is a bit. This goblet cells is a bit. Glycoproteins is a bit. Okay, ciliated epithelium is a bit. So all bits only, these all are neat bits only. So micron, what is the use of this mucus and this mucus importance? The mucus traps the microorganisms and dust particles attached in the mucus films, and those all are the dust which are attached to the mucus. They all will be trapped and carried upwards to the passed down the gullet during normal swallowing. So it will go to the gullet. Next, very important, another neat bit, the thin elastic flap. What do you call that is? A thin elastic flap called epiglottis prevents the food to go into the larynx. So food should not go into the, what is the point here to remember? Food should not enter into the larynx. Why food should not enter into the enter the larynx? That will reach us the lungs and there will be dangerous and very problems will be arise. So what we have to do, there will be, then which one is not allowing the food entering into the what you call larynx and trachea? Number one is a elastic flap like structure will be there, that is called epiglottis. So most important bit, so many times asked in the exam also, epiglottis. It prevents the flow of the food into the larynx, okay, and also avoids the choking of food. So like this, the epiglottis prevents the what you called entry of food into the larynx and avoids the choking of food. So then food will go to esophagus. Then food pipe is there now, esophagus. Only wind air will be go to the trachea. So these points must and should have to remember. What are the need bits? Goblet cells, mucus. Mucus consists of slimy material, consists of glycoprotein. Next, what is the epithelial? Which epithelial present in the trachea? Ciliated epithelium. What's the conducting zone? The conducting zone from external nostril to terminal bronchioles. What is the respiratory zone? Alveoli and ducts are called respiratory zones. So, like this, there will be important neat bits are there. Next, which one? Epiglottis prevents the flow. Next, come to the next important part of the respiratory system, windpipe. It's called trachea. What is it called? Trachea. Trachea is a semi-flexible tube. Semi-flexible tube, very important. Flexible. Multiple cartilaginous rings, C-shaped rings. What is the use of C-shaped rings? Multiple cartilaginous rings. These rings mainly to stop the collapsing or protects collapsing the trachea from pressures. Cartilaginous rings, C-shaped cartilaginous rings. Okay, so like this, the C-shaped, see this is a trachea for example, the C-shaped, like the C-shaped cartilaginous rings are there. What is the use of that? I said the cartilaginous rings protects the trachea from collapsing. So the trachea then extended onto mid-thoracic cavity. Mid-thoracic you know very well. So chest region, mid-thoracic cavity at the level of 5th thoracic vertebrae. How many were thoracic, lumbar, sacral? Like that vertebrae is there or not? Sacral, lumbar, coccyx, okay, like that. First, here I am telling the level of the 5th thoracic vertebrae, up to 5th thoracic vertebrae, trachea will become, then after that will be bifurcated, split into right and left bronchi. One bronchi, okay, bronchus will be there. So what we have to remember is the bronchi will go into the lungs, right? Splitted like that. So right bronchus, left bronchus. So in the right lung and left lung, again this bronchi is divided into, very important word, what that will be divided into secondary bronchi and tertiary bronchi. Secondary bronchi, tertiary bronchi, and last they will be like that, quaternary bronchi like that, it will be divided at last, it will go into terminal bronchus. At last exchange of bronchus is here in the alveoli, that is called respiratory bronchus. Like this, how many? Bronchi, right and left, one bronchus, one, each lung have one bronchus. Then bronchi separate into bronchus singular, okay. So bronchi separate into, divided into secondary bronchi. Secondary bronchi divided into again tertiary bronchi. Tertiary bronchi to terminal bronchi. Terminal bronchi to respiratory bronchus. Like this, the bronchi, that is called pulmonary tree. Like this, primary bronchi, secondary bronchi, tertiary bronchi, terminal bronchi, respiratory bronchi, all the small tubes coupled together called, what you call, you know, respiratory tree are very helpful for the, what you called, exchange of the gases. Carbon dioxide will go out through this bronchi. Same at the same time, oxygen will become inside of the lungs through this bronchi only. So bronchus is very important structures in the, which one? In the respiration part. So like this, the parts will be there in the lungs. So tomorrow we are going to discuss about bronchi have which shaped rings, C-shaped cartilaginous rings to ensure the passage and do not collapse with the pressure. And also respiratory function, what are the functions of bronchioles, what is the function of bronchi, and what is the function of bronchioles, and what is where the alveoli is there, what is the alveoli function, how alveoli will be helpful for the diffusion of gases. These are all points we will be discussed. Okay, children. So voice box is larynx, windpipe, trachea, units of lungs, alveoli, respiratory zone, conducting zone, okay, glottis to trachea. So ciliated epithelium. So glycoprotein, slimy rich material is called, what is called? Rich protein, slimy material rich in the glycoprotein. Like this, all the concepts which are very important in the respiratory system and examination point of view, which are important, those all bits are there in this. So I have to compulsory prepare the notes for this glycoprotein, this epithelial cells, like that. Okay, next. So what is the semi flexible trachea? Trachea is a semi flexible. It will be bend little bit, not completely flexibly. It will be bend according to the pressures. So that's why semi flexible. So trachea helpful for passage of the air. So like this, windpipe trachea, another name is called windpipe is there.